All right, welcome back to Braver New Worlds, a podcast about the stories we need to tell for the future that we want to see. My name is Nathan Young. I am your host for this podcast. And before I get into the actual the podcast and talking about the guests and everything, I just want to acknowledge something that's, a little bit exciting going on in the world of this podcast. This is officially episode number 10. So that's pretty exciting, right? It's like one of those round numbers. I really appreciate everybody who's been listening to this podcast so far. I've gotten a lot of great feedback from friends and people that I've, just acquaintances, even on social media, that have been listening to the podcast. And so that's been really cool to see. And I also just want to, express my gratitude to the guests that have come on the podcast so far. I really appreciate that. And, I've just been very pleased with, the way this has all gone so far. I knew I wanted to do this and did the work to figure out how I was going to make it all work. And I had very modest expectations for how it'd go. I didn't really think that it was going to be amazing right off the bat. I know that these things take time and they take work, but I've been really pleasantly surprised by the amount of people that have been listening, to see little numbers in the analytics. And we get a good amount of listens every week. So that's great. I really appreciate it. I'm glad that people are listening and checking it out. Most of the listens are coming on YouTube, which I didn't expect. That's not really where I watch podcasts, but if that's where other people go, that's great. One thing I'm curious about, I wonder if there's anybody out there listening that had no idea who I was or didn't know any of their guests prior to this podcast. You just kind of found it and you've been listening ever since. I'd be very curious if there's anybody out there like that. So if you are, find me, send me a message somehow. Got a pretty cool episode for this week's episode 2. I am talking to Dr. Lynn Marie Morski. She is a physician, an attorney, and the president of the Psychedelic Medicine Association. So she's working to bring psychedelic medicine, such as psilocybin, ayahuasca, DMT, and others into the more mainstream healthcare system. And I'm guessing a lot of people who listen to this podcast are at least somewhat familiar with the idea of psychedelic medicine, and maybe they've dabbled in a little bit or considered it, but probably don't know a whole lot about it. But it's a pretty exciting world. I mean, there's been a lot of very favorable clinical trials and use cases for psychedelic medicine that have come up. Lynn Marie is really working to generate some mainstream acceptance of these options as legitimate medical treatments for situations like depression, PTSD, and others. And she's doing this through her podcast and through conversations she has with healthcare professionals. And so in this conversation, we explore what psychedelic medicine actually is and what it might look like for these treatments to become normal in our world. We also talk about the difference between recreational use and therapeutic use and the gray area between there. We also talk about the science behind how these substances affect the brain and what it really takes to create some lasting change around these topics, both for the medicine to create a lasting change in all of us, if we choose to check it out, or, to create a lasting change in a sort of societal level around acceptance of these types of medicine and treatments. I share some of my own experience with psychedelics in the course of this podcast, both recreationally and therapeutically. I have tried some of these things. I'm sure at least a couple of you have too. But, if you've ever been curious to know more and really get into the science behind it, Lynn Marie is a really great resource. I think this episode will be a really good primer or starting point to learn a bit more about psychedelic medicine, the opportunities it presents, the limitations, and kind of where we are in the path towards making them more acceptable in a mainstream way. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. Lynn Marie Morski, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Nathan. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, I always just like to start off by having my guests introduce themselves real briefly so listeners know a little bit about you from your own words.
Oh, I'm Lynn Marie. I'm a dancer and a drummer and a wannabe surfer and a diver. And I do some psychedelic stuff in my professional life.
Most people don't say I do psychedelic stuff in my professional life. That usually isn't how that's capped. So, and that's what we're going to be here to talk about today is the state of psychedelic medicine. But I'm also thinking about, I was on your podcast 10 years ago when you were the first person I knew with a podcast.
Oh, really? I think you might have even been guest number 2. Okay. On that show, which was 2018. I was the first person you knew with a podcast. Wow.
I think
it's an
so.
honor.
Yeah.
I still have one. It isn't the same one, but shockingly 8 years later, that's a decent run on the pod waves, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Good for you. So you're a pro at this.
I'm something. Podcasting is about consistency. Mm-hmm. More about consistency than professionality, I would say. You could spend $100,000 to make one fantastic episode, but if you never make a second, then you're not really that effective.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe low budget, but they keep coming.
Well, that's it, right? Because a lot of us just I love the whole idea of podcasting. I like the idea of just listening to it and the back in my ears as I'm doing other stuff. So I'm excited to finally be doing this.
There you go.
All right. So let's see. So let's get into the psychedelic medicine. And I guess I'd be curious, just like, can you tell us a little bit more about specifics of the work that you do with psychedelic medicine and kind of like, top level state of the industry? Because I think a lot of people that listen to my podcast would probably be curious. And I think it's a lot of people that would
what is this? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a lot of people that are like interested in psychedelic medicine. I'm sure a lot of people have tried it. Probably get some people that are like on the fence or like intrigued, but just kind of not really sure like how to approach it. Do I have to like know a person that knows a person, or can I like do a Google search for something?
Please
like,
don't do any of those things. No.
Okay.
So I will start by describing what it is, but the preamble to this is two preambles. One, I may be a doctor and a lawyer, but this is neither medical nor legal advice, giving you my own disclaimer. And secondly, most of the things we're going to be discussing about are not available legally in California, if that is where most of your listeners are. So yes, psychedelic medicine is the therapeutic use of, I would say, a psychedelic substance, but the definition of psychedelic is very wide. But I'll tell you some of the things that fall under that definition as far as myself and my organization and my podcast are concerned. We have things like psilocybin, that's magic mushrooms, LSD, ayahuasca, DMT, 5-MeO-DMT. And then we also consider things like MDMA, which is less of a psychedelic and more of like an empathogen, something that creates empathy, and ketamine, which is more of a dissociative, but we lump them all together for the purposes of having, a Psychedelic Medicine Association. And of those, the one that you can access legally here in California is ketamine. The other things are either going to be in clinical trials, or if you're in the state of Oregon or Colorado where they have an adult use model for psilocybin up and running, then you can access those there. You can access psilocybin and 5-MeO-DMT and ayahuasca and other things outside of the country, sometimes gray market, sometimes, other legal statuses. So, many people listening might have done a psychedelic. What's the difference between that and what we're talking about? Well, very often not a ton in the actual substance, but maybe if you did it just recreationally, you did not take a lot of time to prepare, maybe meet with a therapist, meet with somebody to set an intention, maybe get a set and setting that was specifically focused on, let's say, healing. If you're taking it and going to a where do the kids go? Music festival?
Yeah. Whatever the kids do these days. Who knows?
Whatever the kids do. Not to say that you can't have a therapeutic realization at one of these, but you may be a little bit more focused on, whatever, like dancing or whatever you're doing than going internally. Yes, if you're not watching this, Nathan is dancing. But it's probably less likely that you're like, okay, I'm going to put on an eye mask and go internally and, try to examine my trauma or some limiting beliefs or things like that. And then also afterward, in psychedelic medicine, we recommend there be a period of integration. You might have had things come up during your psychedelic experience that you're like, whoa, that's some new information to me. If you're like, okay, noted, and then you just get back about your life, well, it's kind of like we had a webinar last night about psychedelics and GLP-1s, and it's kind of like, yeah, you can take your GLP-1, make no changes. You stop taking the GLP-1, your weight's going to come back. But if you're while you have the GLP-1 in your system, you start eating better, exercising, doing all the things, then it's more likely that the benefits are going to stick with you. Same thing with psychedelics. If you come out and you do integration, which is meeting with a coach or a therapist to figure out how to integrate the things you learned or experienced into your life, much more likely that it's going to have a lasting impact. So that's where a lot of the differences lie, is in the preparation, integration, set and setting, and also the legality, right? Like most things that people have done are probably recreationally, that they've done it recreationally are probably not legal. If you've even done ketamine recreationally, that was not legal because you were not in a medical setting. There are a few people who might have like had a lozenge prescribed to them and they took it in a recreational setting. That would still be legal. But if you got it in powder form, it is probably not legal. So yeah, I think that describes psychedelic medicine.
Okay. And I'll come clean here and tell you my own experience with these type of things too, just to like maybe set the conversation a little bit, because I did magic mushrooms a lot in college a bunch of times, and it was fun, but I had no notion of there being any sort of like, the way that it was talked about, like, oh man, it opens your mind. Like it was talked about it that way back then, but it wasn't like, this will help you heal trauma. And, like that was not part of the conversation at all. And then, yes, I did MDA a couple times, going to what we called raves back then. And we called it ecstasy back then, right?
You mean you did MDMA?
Oh, yeah.
MDA is different. Yeah.
Okay.
Just so you know.
MDMA. We called it, when it was called ecstasy back then, that's what all the kids called it. And then I did, my most recent experience was with that mail order ketamine that they sent me. I think I told you about this once before. And yeah, and they sent it to me in the mail. And I remember, telling my therapist about it, and she was like, "They sent it to you in the mail?" She was like, couldn't believe they did that. And I think you had a very similar reaction when I told you about this, like when I saw you.
Oh, no, I mean, I used to work at an at-home ketamine thing. So we sent people ketamine in the mail all the time. It was I think it was the fact that it was an everyday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, mine was like a microdosing thing, which you said isn't necessarily like the usually prescribed way of doing it, or one that's not really like verified.
Yeah.
I will say for myself, it was quite amazing though. Like just the experience I had. I was a little bit desperate at the time. I'd been seeking something because I was starting to come to the realization that I did have like generalized anxiety disorder. I didn't really know completely what that was, but I knew I kind of felt like, okay, maybe I do have this. And I tried that ketamine therapy, and it was just a daily thing. And the wildest thing was like about a week into it. I mean, I just started it, and I just had this period of about a week. It just kind of came up one day. The whole world got a lot more quiet, a lot more mellow. I felt so much better. Yeah, I was just had this sort of thinness and level of functionality that I had never really experienced before in my life. And it wasn't necessarily that like I wasn't functioning before, but it was just taking a lot more energy. And I had to like kind of coach myself a lot. And I was so used to doing that from day one that I didn't even realize I was doing it. And then when I had that experience of like being so much more in control of my own emotions, being able to regulate myself, and I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, this is what the world could be like. Like, this is what it was. And I knew enough about trauma at that point to be like, oh, this is probably what it feels like to not be completely dictated by trauma at all times. And the effects, it lasted about a week. And the wildest part about it was to feel it wearing off and feel the anxiety coming back and feeling like, and realizing like how little control I had over that. And it just really opened my eyes to like, yeah, there was no way I was going to like self-care my way out of that or meditate my way out of that anxiety. Like I needed this outside help. And so that was really a motivating factor for me to like pursue more prescription-based anti-anxiety medication, which ended up being, a game changer in the long run. So that's like my experience with psychedelic medicine.
Did and this is like so off topic, but whatever, here we are. Yeah. Did you like, did they just give you 2 weeks of it, and then like the second week things kicked in and then you were off of it?
No, I stayed on it for a while, and I stayed on it for probably like 6 months to a year. Well, I think what happened was it had this like amazing, profound like hit at the beginning. And then I kind of went back more to baseline, but then there were steady improvements throughout the whole time I was using it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And the reason I gave it up it was like $100 a month, which wasn't that much, but it was a lot. And then I had to also like check in every day via text. So it was just sort of like got to the point where like the money and the admin essentially got to be more than it was worth for what I was getting out of it. But I did, up until that point, I really felt I was getting a lot out of it. And I really appreciated the help that it was doing for me.
And since we're already here and we're airing all of your medical stuff, did you feel withdrawals? Because ketamine can be addictive. And that's one of the reasons that I like, raise an eye at everyday ketamine, is because I'm just not sure how much that would have an addictive effect.
Yeah, I definitely think I felt some withdrawals. It wasn't too intense, and it wasn't like anything I couldn't just, what's it called? White knuckle it through. Yeah, it wasn't anything too bad. But also, I am a person that has experience with like quitting cigarettes and alcohol and other things too. So I sort of knew what I was getting into in that regard. It wasn't like completely seamless. It wasn't like I just stopped and it was fine. I definitely was craving it for a week or two after the fact, but it wasn't anything that I couldn't manage without.
Good to know.
Yeah. And I was doing very like deliberate sort of just personal therapies while I was doing it. I read this book by, what's the guy's? He's one of the main like early trauma guys. No, not him. Peter Attia, maybe? Is that
And definitely not Peter Attia.
is that the guy that we don't
Mate.
like?
Well, he's in the Epstein file 1,700 times.
Yeah. What's
not
the other?
liking him.
Yeah. Oh, Levine.
Gabor Mate. Oh,
Levine.
who?
Levine? Something Levine? The book was something about a tiger, waking the tiger, the sleeping tiger. Okay.
Hey guys, go to your local library and just tell them something Levine and something about a tiger.
We'll put it in the show notes or I'll like overdub like what it is here. Editor's note, the book was Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine. But it was yeah. But it was interesting because in the book, I do audiobooks because I'm, like podcast audiobooks. And one of the things in the book, he had these sort of visual narrations that he did. And one of them was he called it the Mountain Meadow. And you're supposed to visualize yourself as like a baby elk in a meadow. And you're with your mother, you're with the herd. And then a mountain lion jumps out of the bushes. And you go through all this sort of like all the panic responses, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, or basically like he kind of walked you through visualizations of all of those. And so I would listen to that and do that visualization each night as I took the ketamine. And I think that was really helpful also to like have that. And I tried to find more of those kind of visualizations, but I didn't. And I actually had a hard time finding good audio visualization things that I thought were helpful. They're all like either like a little bit too woo, or I didn't like the background music, or like just the person needed a better microphone or something like that. So
that is true.
I was a little bit shocked how hard it was to find another alternative, like audio thing like that. So yeah. That was
I have nothing to add
experience.
to that.
Okay. Well, okay. So let's try this. So maybe what you can do though, because I think a lot of people that maybe listen to this, like I said, they're probably open to the idea of psychedelic medicine and they are willing to like believe that it's a thing and it's valid. But I think they probably hear more like anecdotal experiences from friends about how it helped, but maybe like a more like clinical explanation of like what's going on and like what is the benefit and potential of psychedelic medicine in that regard.
Sure. So different psychedelic medicines are good for different indications. And the word indication here means different disease states. Now, we could take all the steps back and be like, should we be pathologizing everything? Well, just for this conversation, we'll call things like depression or anxiety or PTSD, right? But not to say that if you haven't been given one of those diagnoses, it won't help with your sad feelings that are just short of depression kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But these are being investigated. A lot of times we'll investigate this specific psychedelic for this specific condition or indication. So like MDMA is being investigated for PTSD. That was like one of the first things. However, the more that drug development companies come out with, and universities, everybody who's doing research comes out with more trials, we're finding a whole lot of medicines are good for a lot of the same conditions. So we've looked at so many things for treatment-resistant depression. 5-MeO-DMT, psilocybin, ketamine, right? And so some of those work similarly to each other and some work differently. Like ketamine and psilocybin have different mechanisms of action, but I have to say, just right off the top, we're not 100% sure how or why these work. I mean, it's brand new, right? Like, but we know how they interact with the body. We know that, the things that are called classic psychedelics, which is your LSD, psilocybin, ayahuasca, they work on the serotonin receptor. We know that ketamine works on the NMDA receptor. That's a glutamate receptor. And so we know how they're interacting. And we also know this other step, which is we know a few other things that they do. And so one of those things is that they help different regions of the brain connect. So if you look at these, this is your brain on psilocybin models, it shows connections between parts of the brain that are not there at baseline. So partially that's why I can taste colors, right? Like some people get like synesthesia under these. But also it may be like, oh, I didn't previously realize that my current anxiety is due to this thing that happened in grade school, right? Like it can help you also help you connect those dots, right? So we know what it does at a receptor level. One of the other things it does besides this brain connectivity is it can lead to neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. Some of them can lead to neurogenesis. What do these words mean? Neuroplasticity is the plasticity of your neurons, the cells in the brain, right? Neuroplasticity is like, okay, we're teaching our brain how to make new connections, form new pathways, that kind of thing. Neurogenesis is growing new neurons. And so they have studied things like DMT in stroke patients. Stroke is where neurons die, and they have regrown parts of the brain. So that is another one of the mechanisms. Another thing that commonly is seen is that it can take the default mode network more offline. That's one way to put it. And so Robin Carhart Harris put it like this. You've got if you had, we're sledding down a hill over and over in the same rut. And then somebody came along and just shook it up like a snow globe. And then that rut was gone. Maybe you could have a different thought. Maybe the thought is, I'm worthless, I'm worthless, I'm worthless. And then shake, shake, shake. And then you no longer default to that thought.
Yeah.
Your monkey mind doesn't go there. So that would be very helpful if you were, depressed because of that thought. And then for PTSD, certain things like MDMA can take the amygdala, quote unquote, offline in a way. The amygdala is the fear center. And so while you're doing MDMA assisted therapy, again, I maybe kind of glossed over that, but a lot of psychedelic medicines come with therapy. Less and less day by day as we're coming up with new ones, and also because it's really difficult to pay for 2 therapists for an 8-hour session. So we're trying to find ways around that. But to make the most of it, great to have a therapist in there. And if you're suffering from PTSD and you do MDMA and it takes your fear center offline, you may be able to discuss that traumatic experience with that therapist without fear, or even just think about it with yourself, plus or minus the therapist, without fear. And then it gets every time you bring up a memory, it gets like kind of programmed into your brain.
Yeah.
You can reprogram it into your brain without all the fear attached to it. That is a good step, and no longer having flashbacks or being afraid of the crowd or whatever the thing is that is, your PTSD symptom. So that's just kind of like an overview of all the different ways that psychedelics work. And what we don't know is, how does what you experience lead to healing, right? Because some studies will show, lots of them, with something like psilocybin, where you may have a hallucination and you may have this whole journey where, I was back with my, name ancestor who has passed kind of thing. And I learned this and that, or I pulled up some old trauma. Like, how does that correlate to healing versus I went in? I mean, I worked in a ketamine clinic for a year. Some people had no experience, but they were still getting better. And so we don't know yet what the exact correlation is between, and it depends per medication. Like, we think maybe with psilocybin, it's more important. With ketamine, it's less important. But anyway, that's the overview of how they work.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And thank you for sharing all that. I really appreciate it, because I think on some level, I'd sort of had some notion of all of that, but just to hear you say it in that succinct way right now is really helpful. And I think about that too. Like, I think a lot of as you know, I do coaching, I do like public speaking coaching, and something that comes up a lot sometimes is people will struggle with a certain part of a talk they want to give, or they're going to be sharing something a little bit more vulnerable than they thought. They've got, depending on the audience, they're going to get really nervous about the talk. And since learning about trauma, I've tried to become like a trauma-informed public speaking coach, and I'm always kind of careful with how I dabble in it and make sure the person's like ready for it. But oftentimes we will sort of discuss, okay, is there a trauma reaction there? What is that? And how is that coming up for you in this moment? And what are you afraid of? The classic question is like, when was the first time you remember that feeling? And then they'll kind of realize, I remember my mom when I was 8 years old told me I wasn't good enough for some reason. One of the exercises I like to do is just have them imagine being that 8-year-old and saying back to your mom or whoever it was, like, what did you want to say then? Like, what would you say now? And I imagine that's such an empowering exercise to do with people. And I can imagine it was somebody that was like trained to do it in the context of these psychedelics. That could be like a really empowering exercise. So yeah, that's interesting. Like, it could be empowering, plus with that neuroplasticity, like really like rewire the thinking.
And that's why we talk about, like, with when I gave that example and correlated with the GLPs, it changes your physiology for a period of time. There's a window after where you have this increased neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
Well, what would you like to do with that window? Would you like to make some new habits? Because whatever you're doing at that point is much more likely to be laid down in your neurons. So take advantage. And the periods vary. Like with ketamine, it's about 48 hours. Psilocybin, MDMA, 2 to 3 weeks. Ibogaine, which is the longest, it's 1 month. So yeah, that's why the integration is so important.
Yeah. As much as I love doing this podcast, Sad truth of it all is that doesn't pay the bills. It actually costs me money to make this podcast. But that's okay. I love doing it, so we're doing it. So what does pay the bills for me is I help individuals and organizations leverage the power of storytelling for leadership and persuasion. This is the work I do, and I want to tell you about it real quick here. For organizations, a lot of times the work is very much focused on fundraising for nonprofits, or developing a narrative strategy for the important messages that they want to get out in their campaigns. It can also be about developing leadership and communication skills amongst the team that you've already got working within your organization. For individuals, a lot of my work revolves around helping develop a narrative-based communication approach for those high-leverage career moments that come up from time to time, like giving a public talk, interviewing for a new position, integrating into a new role at a new company, or making the leap for yourself to jump into entrepreneurship and how you talk about the work that you do with the external audiences there too. These are very much the moments that can have a huge impact on your career. And by utilizing storytelling and narrative, you can not only communicate a more resonant message about what it is you're doing, but also one that's going to stick. So if this is intriguing to you and you want to know more, you can check out my website, storycultureconsulting.com. I'll have a free tool on there that's available for download, or you can check out the show notes too. I'll have the same tool down there that you can grab too. Once again, that's storycultureconsulting.com. And now back to the show. A lot of your work is about trying to just get psychedelic medicine to be more accepted, and specifically working with doctors to get them about this. Can you tell us a little bit more about your specific work and sort of the state of where this all is right now?
Certainly. So, as I said before, don't have a lot of options at this point, but we do have a number of medicines. I mean, it might be up to 7 at this point that have been given breakthrough therapy designation by the FDA, which means that the FDA will fast track it. Now, that is the beginning and end of what I'm going to say about the U.S. government right now. But the point is, there may be some psychedelic options soon. And imagine that after, most people listening to this podcast are probably in the vicinity of our age, and they grew up with the DARE program and Just Say No and Nancy Reagan and this is your brain on drugs, here's the fried egg. And so that's probably most doctors right now. That's what they were brought up with. And so it would not be an overnight change. If suddenly something became FDA approved tomorrow and the doctor had not at all heard about psychedelic medicine prior, that's a big leap to go from I've never heard of psychedelic medicine to I'm going to prescribe magic mushrooms to my patient, So back in 2019, I foresaw that and decided that I would focus my professional life on educating clinicians, which is doctors, therapists, NPs, PAs, anybody who sees a patient on psychedelics. And yes, I started way early because I knew it would take a while to get people more comfortable. Maybe they're okay and they're initially okay with ketamine, but that's because ketamine's been legal in medical use since 1960 or 70. Then they would work up to, okay, well, I could see this new research. It's not an overnight process. So that's what I've dedicated basically my professional life to. And that's part of integrating these into the current medical system. We don't want this to be a separate system. How do most people get medical care? Insurance. We want this to be so ingrained in the medical system that insurance will cover it. Now, if there's anybody listening who's just already threw up a hand indigenous use and all this stuff, I'm not saying that is not okay. I live in a yes and world. So nothing that I'm saying is at the exclusion of a different thing, except for the exclusion of very unsafe practices.
Yeah.
Ketamine is a great example. You can get ketamine prescribed. You can get ketamine on the street. Do we all know people in San Diego who at least know somebody who died from ketamine? Yes, and from street, ketamine, or some adulterated medicine, right? There's enough people peripheral to the psychedelics industry have had that as their demise. Whereas if, there is another option, yes, you can't abuse that other option as easily, but look, you just said for a year you got it shipped to your house legally. If something had gone wrong with you, there would have been recourse. And that's the difference, is that when people are doing things unsafe in other manners, there isn't legal recourse. Maybe there might be a lawsuit, but you can't get them, they don't lose their medical license or this kind of thing, right? So anyway, one thing, insurance. Number 2, safety. These are 2 huge reasons we want to get it in the medical system. 3, accessibility. I think you were saying at the beginning, where do people get this? No, we want you to go to your doctor and get it the same place you would get medical care, right? We don't want you having to go to the dark web to find these things. We want it to be accessible to all through an above ground, the same way you would get your antibiotics kind of thing. And think about that also, because I'm my parents, are my parents going to do recreational mushrooms? They're very conservative, church-going people. No, they're not. But if their doctor said, hey, this thing might help you, maybe they would do it, right? And so there's so many reasons that for these medicines to get to the people, the widest swath of people who can benefit from them, it needs to be ingrained into the mainstream current medical model. So that is part of, educating doctors is one piece of that puzzle. Another that the Psychedelic Medicine Association, we formed a second nonprofit arm to tackle, is accrediting psychedelic training programs, because we want there to be a way that if you want to have a therapist sit with you during your ketamine, we want you to know who's well trained. And right now there's a million psychedelic therapy training programs. Some are 4 hours, some are 2 years. And as a patient, you don't know. And as a referring doctor, I don't know, right? And so we are forming an accreditation so that if you go to an accredited training program, afterward, you would be able to sit for essentially a board exam and then become a board certified psychedelic therapist, so that there would be another level of quality control and standardization.
Yeah, that's so also interesting. So is the kind of the big picture goal of it then is to, just make this available as just another set of treatments that people could have for anything that they would need, but like just expanding the options that people have for care and for healing and for feeling better and getting better and managing in capitalism or whatever it is.
100%. Like, I would love to make psychedelics boring. That would be, that's like, that would be my goal. Like, the amount of times where I'm like, why is your company called this obnoxious? Like, a lot of the psychedelic drug development companies just renamed themselves. 3 have renamed themselves to things that sounded less trippy. And thank God, because like trying to convince somebody to take trippy trippers and psychedelic, as a drug is a little different from like, here is, BPL3, and so that's, I just want to make it normal. I don't want it to be that like a patient walks in with tie-dye and I'm like, oh, that's the one who wants psychedelics. No, I want, your average Joe to think like, hey, these are options just like the other options.
Yeah.
They may be a little weird and wild while I'm in them. Some of them, a lot of the ones that are being created now are being created without the hallucinogenic factor for many different reasons. And, they're still built off of psychedelics, but okay, the second last time I'll mention the government, but I was at a round table in DC the other day, and somebody said, well, what we've gleaned is that the government doesn't like the term psychedelics. We're going to call them neuroplastogens or psychoplastogens or serotonergic plastogen. Call it what you want. All I know is that at the end of the day, some of these are still like some of the phase 3 things that are about to go in front of the FDA are just psilocybin, and that's just magic mushrooms. And so you can call it what you want. Like, that's why it's called the Psychedelic Medicine Association and the Psychedelic Medicine Podcast, is that like, some of these are still going to have a psychedelic journey in them, and we want that to be normalized. And like you said, with the trauma informed, if somebody is not ready or does not desire to have a psychedelic experience, but they still want healing, great. I'm so glad they're making these other options, and that there are maybe ways that you can get to the same place with less of that kind of what may be an anxiety producing experience for them. But I want it to be boring. I want it to be just like other medicines, with the vast difference that you don't take it every day. This is more of like psycho spiritual surgery on a level, some of these where you go in, like if I was going to get my ACL reconstructed, which I have beforehand, I did a little physical therapy, some preparation, then I did the surgery, and then afterward I did physical therapy, right? Which is like the integration. And then let's hope that lasts for a while and that new ACL doesn't tear. If it does tear again, I'll get another surgery. But that's kind of what these are like, is that we're showing they've got, a lot of them are really durable, but you only had to do them 2 times in 6 months kind of thing, which is great, because I will, and by the way, I'm going to put my flag right here, I will never shun or naysay or anything to an antidepressant. They absolutely have their roles. But some people, they don't work, and other people, they have side effects, so they don't want to take them. So if there's a psychedelic option that works just as well, but you don't have daily side effects, then fantastic. Maybe that's an option for that person.
Yeah, totally. So is a lot of the hang up then, because you mentioned how most doctors now are like our age or older. And we were probably born around late 70s, grew up in the 80s and 90s. Yeah. And I definitely get the impression there was sort of a shift for people maybe a little bit younger than us, to where these things became much more normal. Because I remember when I first encountered the idea of medicinal marijuana, and I was like, whatever, get real. I didn't really buy it. I wasn't believing it. But now I'm like, okay, fine. Like I see now, just my preconceived notion of it was so ingrained with like smoking pot as like, a thing that we did in college and high school. And so much of my experience with a lot of these things you're talking about, I mean, just like you said, just bought it off some random guy with tie-dyes and dreadlocks down on the Mission Beach boardwalk, and like somehow we're still alive today. And so
speak for yourself. I did not buy anything from the Mission Beach before.
Yeah, I just outed myself there.
Next time you wonder what's wrong with Nathan, is that we're looking at the Mission Beach mushrooms.
Yeah, right. No, I don't think it was that. So I think there's other things. But even as I kind of approached it with like an open mind and having tried these things recreationally, even as I started to hear about them more clinically, I had a resistance. And it wasn't this strongly held thing. It was just sort of my first initial gut reaction. And then in the middle of like a bajillion other things going on in my life, I don't have time to think about it that much more. But it has been the repetition and like hearing more stories from more friends that has gotten me much more acclimated to like just shifting that perspective from even like the street names, like magic mushrooms, to like psilocybin and ecstasy or Molly to MDMA, like just switching that perception has definitely happened to me slowly over time. And so I guess like, is that kind of the theory of change here? And just as like younger doctors are coming up, they're just going to be more and more open to it, and more people are going to try it. And then
that's
hopefully,
the hope, right? I mean, I think the first cannabis medicalization was in 1996. And so, if we were born in the late 70s, we were in our 20s by that time. And so we grew up in a whole world, like you said, high school, where there was no medical cannabis. So that was a whole game. But people younger than us, basically anybody younger than us, has spent most of their formative years thinking that marijuana could be a medicine, right? So I think automatically that kind of set the stage. The difference is marijuana and psychedelics, cannabis and psychedelics, I have gone about it completely different ways. Cannabis went straight to legalization, and we are going the FDA route, which is the only difference, which on the doctor front, I think really actually works for psychedelics, because what do physicians use? Evidence-based medicine. Well, we're cranking out evidence every day. There's so many psychedelic trials, right? And so that I think really has worked in our favor. And I think that the combination of, like you said, anecdotes plus evidence is going to be really hard to ignore. There's so much on the news and everything coming out about this that when I last sat at an internal medicine conference in 2024, that's a conference of all like just general medicine physicians, nobody came up and said, "What is this?" Most had at least even if they at least walked up and said, "Is this talking like microdosing?" Hey, then at least they've heard of it. And that, like, I think microdosing actually as a concept, even though it's one of the least studied things and found least to be effective, has at least worked its way into the vernacular to where that's not so out of the realm of reality. And since it's sub-perceptual, you're not microdosing to like trip every day. That if you're microdosing and you can feel it, you're doing it wrong. So I think that is so much more similar to the take this every morning pill thing that we're used to, that was easier for people to kind of like glob onto. Like, oh, I don't have to go have a crazy ass trip. I can just wake up every morning, take my microdose. I'm, getting the psychedelic benefits in a way that doesn't, disrupt my life.
Yeah.
And I think that was so palatable that I think that's kind of another gateway that people have been led to it. So yeah, it's the 6 years I've been doing this, 7 years, I guess, outside of, I did the podcast started 7 years ago, but definitely the conversation has changed within physicians. I mean, they put out papers all the time showing how many are in favor, how many know what it is, and just the numbers are vastly different in that past 6 years.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So the other thing I hear sometimes, and this like kind of goes a little bit into conspiracy theory, so I'd be curious to hear your take on this, where like, I think I actually asked you about this before, but like just the line you'll hear sometimes is like, well, the pharmaceutical industry doesn't want this to become legal because they want us buying the more expensive drugs.
Most pharmaceutical drugs are generic, and like your average antidepressant is generic. And so if this is competing with antidepressants, what is Prozac? It's probably like, I don't know, $5 a month at this point. Like they are not making tons of money off most antidepressants. And that's what is the main competitor at this point. No, I think we've seen AbbVie has purchased one psychedelic already. AbbVie is, it's close. It's like the cousin of, I don't know, Abbott or one of the, or Amgen. Yeah. There's, like AbbVie is a major pharmaceutical company. Otsuka, which is a Japanese pharmaceutical company, is a sponsor of the Psychedelic Medicine Association.
Oh, cool.
So that tells you, like, they see dollar signs too. Psychedelic medicine is not going to be any cheaper than other medicines, let me tell you. So no, they're going to, I think they're going to use it just like other medicines. Yeah. So that is not a conspiracy theory I subscribe to. I think they're going to want, the first psychedelic that was FDA approved was through Johnson & Johnson.
Oh,
which
okay,
is
interesting.
esketamine, which is a version of ketamine that now, they did a thing where they found a way to make money off something that was already generic. So yeah, but it
Yeah,
has brought ketamine to jillions of people who would not have it otherwise.
yeah,
Why? Because yes, it is extremely expensive, but insurance covers it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
insurance
yeah.
does not cover your at-home stuff that you were talking about,
Mhm,
right? Doesn't cover the injections I used to do in my clinic, right? It
mhm.
only covers at this point the Johnson & Johnson product, right? So no, they want a piece of the pie just as badly as anybody else does.
Okay. Well, and I imagine for some people, because there's a sort of strange emotional juxtaposition here of wanting this to be available, but then also sort of, but like almost like a sacrilege of like ancient medicine and ancient wisdom or something like that. What am I
Why?
saying here? I
I don't
don't
know.
know.
You have to explain that.
Well, because a lot of this stuff, it is THC, psilocybin, ayahuasca. These existed as ceremonial plants that I'm kind of guessing that this is what the story that we hear, that these existed as like ceremonial plants and medicines that indigenous people all over the world have been using since the beginning of time.
But
And
no, actually, no.
no, okay, tell
No,
me.
if you listen to an episode from like a couple of weeks ago on the podcast,
Mm,
there's apparently no proof that
mm.
a lot of these have thousands of years, because we always say for millennia, since the
Yeah,
beginning
yeah.
of time. There just isn't. There's like maybe a drawing of a toad in one cave, and people are like, see,
Mm,
they were using the toad for right?
okay.
Like, no, I mean, we don't like now Maria Sabina, the mushrooms. We do know that yes, hundreds of years maybe, and
Mhm.
Maria Sabina was around in the last century, right? So like
Yeah.
we have a video of her existing and talking about the
Mhm,
mushrooms, like, so we
mhm,
know that recent past, yes, in the past 100 years, but I think there's so many varying stories, and how many of these are verifiable is a question, right?
uh,
And that, yes, we want to absolutely honor the
mhm.
traditions that these came from. Is it so? But where's the sacrilege? I could see it'd be sacrilege if you, because just we're using that word,
Yeah,
if you
that was my word.
took
Yeah,
a psilocybin mushroom solely to go out and burn a forest, right? Like
yeah,
if you were like, I'd probably be better at arson if I took a psilocybin mushroom. Like then you burn
yeah,
down the forest that the
mhm,
beautiful earth has built, right? Then I'd see that sacrilege, right?
yeah,
But I think what ceremonial healers were trying to do is make people better. What
mhm,
we are trying to do with psychedelics is make people better. And a lot of the things that we do in ceremony are we owe to those traditions. And most, like I said, we're doing a credentialing program. It is part of the requirements that you educate the therapist that you're educating on those traditions, so they know
mhm,
where they came from. And then, so
mhm.
there's a respect for them. There's all kinds of, attempts at reciprocity coming out of
Yeah,
the psychedelics, some more successful than others.
mhm,
We're trying all the time to find ways that native healers can work in similar systems, and they're not demonized because they haven't gone the medical route. Like,
yeah,
it's a constant conversation. But I don't think just using these to get better is somehow sacrilege, because we're
mhm,
using them like outside of circle with a curandera or something
mhm.
like that. It's just, not feasible to do that,
Yeah,
and deliver it in scale. I just think as long as we respect those traditions
mhm,
and acknowledge where they came from, give them gratitude, and don't use those medicines to destroy those communities, I think that
yeah,
would be the sacrilege. And like with something like ibogaine or peyote, peyote is a big discussion. Is like,
mhm,
that is so protected by some of the Native American tribes that most bills that legalize natural things do not legalize peyote, so
mhm,
that people will not come and abuse and take their sacrament,
mm,
because it's not that easy to grow. It takes like forever to grow a peyote
yeah,
button. And so like if randos just came in and started taking their peyote because it was legal now, that would be more of a sacrilege, right? Right. And so we have definitely carved out peyote exceptions in a lot of the bills. So like
yeah,
when something like that comes up, definitely people in the industry, they keep an eye out for that, so that we don't get in those situations where we're doing harm to the people who brought us the medicines. I guess that's kind of like the greater
mhm,
term of the sacrilege is like, are we harming the people who brought us these things? And that's what we're trying
yeah,
not to do.
yeah, yeah, totally, totally. I have to imagine by making it legal, you're making it safer, right? Because I've had hundreds of friends that have done these, gone and done ayahuasca ceremonies, things like that. And almost all of them, like, as far as I know, they've all come back like they had a good experience, or even if they had a bad experience, they knew that was like part of the experience they were trying to have. But I've heard a lot of secondhand stories of people being subject to abuse from there, especially like younger women being subject to abuse on these things. And, I don't want to like denigrate the whole industry of what's going on, but I imagine this is like a standard thing in a lot of things in our world where like making it legal makes it safe. And I have to imagine that's part of the discussion here too, right? Like,
yep. Like, for example, this is not a G-rated show, right, Nathan?
No, I do the explicit thing on the drop down when I send it in. Yeah.
So I'll never forget at a conference, somebody was telling us that one of the first things that you learned at this certain psychedelic therapy training program was don't fuck your clients. And like, they're teaching you that, right? Like off the bat. And then that's the other thing with these accreditations. And but if we have people with letters behind their name doing this, then that means that they have a board that they answer to. And so say you're harmed by a therapist, you can go to that therapist board, that therapist they can have their license pulled, right? They can be sued for malpractice. Like, these are not available in an underground situation. Who's going to be like, I was doing this very illegal thing and then this other people doing an illegal thing did harm to me. Well, there's no rules to this illegal thing and you're both putting yourself in legal harm bringing up that you did it, right? You know, so it's like, no, absolutely. Having a legal option is going to make it safer. Does it keep people from fucking their clients? It does not, but it at least provides like the stick, the carrot versus stick, it provides a stick, right? Like, please don't do this thing. And if you do this thing, there can be repercussions. So yeah, absolutely makes it safer.
So I always like to kind of go to like big visionary grandiosity in these discussions too. And what do you imagine the world would be like if these treatments, these medicines became much more available and legal? Like, what would like be the big difference or change people might experience in their day-to-day lives?
In their day-to-day lives? Well, the first thing that I thought of is that there would be much fewer wars because so many of the people that I've talked to who've done psychedelics who had previously been in war said I would have never gone and done this. I mean, look, we knew this. Why do you think that they were made illegal around the time of the Vietnam War? Like, that's when psychedelics were prohibited at a time where we needed more mind control, right? And so people are doing psychedelics, I could never take a human life again. And I mean, do they change your brain forever and ever if you do nothing to keep it there? No, but it does give you a glimpse into connectedness, into oneness, into all those things. And so I think it makes it a little harder to destroy your planet, to destroy your fellow human, those kinds of things. Now, I've done my fair share of these all for research purposes. And like, because I wanted to be able to talk about what it's like when I speak with researchers and that kind of thing. And do I walk around in a state of like hearts and flowers every day? I do not, but it is also because other people have not, right? So like when you do it and you're at a ceremony and the next few days you're with other people who've done it, it's different than when you go back to the regular world and you know, have to hear about the wars and this kind of thing, right? So if more people had experienced this and then there was less of the like chaos in the world, I think we could, you know, as the hippies would say, raise the vibration, right? But it requires a critical mass of people to be doing it, you know? So that's the grand, I mean, I'm such a democratic socialist. I'm like, well, I mean, if we could do psychedelics and then make college free and healthcare free, then we're all fine.
All here for all of it.
right. But when I still have to go back and pay $800 a month for health insurance and I have my $230,000 in student loans, there's only so hearts and flowers I can feel, right? I still live in the real world. So like I think that's kind of the case for everybody is like, but if everybody had done psychedelics and they didn't have such chips on their shoulders about certain things, maybe they would be more open to, hey, everybody should have healthcare. Yeah. Maybe we should give everybody a fighting chance by giving them basic university. You know, that's in general my you know, idea of nirvana here. Yeah,
like a realistic nirvana.
Pretty much. I mean, we still have to go to school and get healthcare, but yes.
Yeah. I love it. I think appreciate you going there with me, and I really appreciate you. Like, it sounds like you talk about this a lot. You seem very versed in all of this. You've got all your lines. Like, I just appreciate that you just really seem you seem very invested in this, and you've done your own work, and you've got it all here. So,
I mean, like, let's put a spade, since your podcast is people being open and stuff. I refuse to let anybody call me an expert. And I had and in my last ayahuasca journey, we had like a little discussion with the medicine about that. And the point is not that because as a very left-brained, hard-driving perfectionist Virgo, I'm not going to let you call me an expert, because if I don't know every single thing, then I'm like in permanent, like, oh my God, I'm going to be found out for the thing I don't know. Right.
Yeah.
And so doing these kinds of shows make me feel like, oh, I do have a level of expertise. So that's good. Yeah. I'm just surrounded by so many geniuses in the industry. They know everything about but I have to remind myself, like, there have to be people like myself that can hold some amount of knowledge about all the things instead of just like, you know, everything about the serotonin receptor and how psilocybin interacts, right? Like, so thank you for that vote of confidence, Nathan.
Yes,
that was
of course. Well, also, you know as well as I know that the scientists aren't always the best communicators. So
this is true. I have a podcast. There's many episodes where I'm like, oh, oof.
Yeah.
I spent half the time being like, and for the non-scientists out there, gnosis means like they'll use these like super academic words.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of the reason why I started the podcast I did too, is like to talk to the communicators, because it's going to always there's going to need to be communicators in the movement for whatever these things are, and those communicators, they aren't necessarily like going to be subject matter experts, but they're going to be like subject matter, like super knowledgeable, and then also good at communicating the ideas and good at like translating how they communicate the ideas to the different circumstances. And that's all like very, very important. And so that's what you're doing here, Lynn Marie.
All right. I appreciate that. Communication is my jam. So thank you for acknowledging that is a necessary aspect of moving this thing forward.
Yeah. I like hearing it from you too, because I know this is the type of thing that gets talked about on a lot of like podcasts and like the bro podcasts and things like that too, right? Like, and with different degrees of credibility happening, right? So
that's what I hear. Yeah.
Yes. No comment.
I will not listen to any of them, but sure.
Yeah. I mean, I've listened to some of them too, and I definitely like, I'm a little bit more of a credulous or incredulous listener. Like, I feel like I can kind of tell, like, oh, that guy's full of shit. Like, but skeptic, yes. No, I think I would like have many heart attacks if I had to listen to the nonsense. But yeah, I mean, that's why the Psychedelic Medicine podcast, the podcast I've been running for like 7 years, we only have like, there were at the beginning, I had various types of people on. I always had specific topics, but it was maybe 2 years ago, and I had somebody on talking about 5-MeO DMT, and this person, I think he did a good episode. I think everything he said is probably correct, but somebody came to me and said this person was not credentialed, and this is like a big name in the industry had pointed that out, and kind of like almost like a whistleblower person. And then I was like, oh God, if he thinks that, like, I was like, from now on, we only have clinicians and researchers, because I already like wanted to have the highest quality content. Yeah. But again, if the person doing it isn't responsible to something else, right? Like to their IRB or to their clinic or to their license or whatever, then now, have I had people on with licenses that say some woo crap? Yes. But hopefully in between the woo, they're saying some accurate things, right? Yeah. And so I try to be the absolute anti that podcast that you're referring to in every way, in that, like, one, our episodes are generally not longer than 45 minutes. Two, everything is named exactly what is in the episode, right? So like, it's not like you don't just interview famous person in psychedelics. Here, my interview with famous person. No, it is an interview about MDMA for PTSD with this famous person, right? Like that, what condition we're talking about, what medicine we're talking about, so that the listener, because if you're in psychedelics and you're wondering, you might be struggling. Yeah. And I don't want you to have to struggle through finding my podcast. I want that to be like served to you on a platter. Like, hey, you're suffering with PTSD. Here's an episode on what may help, kind of thing. Yeah. So when people maybe are looking for a certain medication for a certain treatment, they Google that and they find you.
Comes right up. That's the point.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So yes, everybody, if you Google a thing and you find the Psychedelic Medicine podcast, you're talking to a good source.
That is the hope. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Well, so this is a good place to wrap up. How can people, obviously people got to go listen to your podcast. We'll put that in the show notes, but what else? How else can people find you?
Well, if you want to support me, I think we're like 20 people shy of having 1,000 subscribers on YouTube for the Psychedelic Medicine podcast, which would be helpful. So if you would like to watch the episodes or subscribe there and never watch an episode, the subscription alone would be very helpful. If you happen to be a philanthropist and you would like to support our efforts toward accreditation, the Psychedelic Medicine nonprofit would be very happy to speak with you. And if you are a clinician and you would like to learn more about psychedelics, we would love to have you join the Psychedelic Medicine Association. It's psychedelicmedicineassociation.org. And yeah, like you said, the podcast is on all platforms. I'm on LinkedIn. The The association is on LinkedIn and Instagram. The podcast is on all the places. You know, it's hard to not find me online. So like one of those 15 places you can connect with my stuff, depending on, you know, if you're a patient, the podcast is probably where to go. If you're a clinician, the association and the podcast would be the places to go.
Cool.
So yeah. And then I think you have my LinkedIn in the show notes. So just reach out. I'm the only Lynn Marie Morski in the world. So it's very easy to find me.
Really? Are you? Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's a real, like there's only 740 Morskis in the world and Lynn Marie is not the most common combination. So
you know exactly how many 740? Like, are you related to all of them?
There's a website. There's a website. You can put in your name.
Like anybody can do this?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, do I know it's accurate? But I go with it. I've Googled Lynn Marie Morski enough times and never found another.
Okay. There's a lot of Nathan Youngs out there, and that's why I started doing the Nathan Cody Young. And I've been adjacent to a lot of them. I've never actually met another Nathan Young in person, but I've like met people who have like met the other ones because it's like just common enough. But also, so you're Nathan Cody Young, but there's also this like series of spy novels, and the main character's name is Nathan Cody, and then there's some other TV show. And the main character's name is Cody Young. And there's a lot of Cody Youngs out there also. So I have like a strange sort of like somewhat internet and not like, yeah.
You won't be the easiest to find necessarily.
Yeah. Like I could, I'm findable, but it takes a little bit of work.
Yeah. Well, I'm the opposite. You will know, especially if you put any of those things in plus psychedelics. Then we've 100% narrowed it down.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much, Lynn Marie, for joining us on the podcast here. And people check out the show notes and go find her and listen to all these things. Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me on, Nathan.
Of course. Thank you. Bye. Thank you so much to Lynn Marie Morski for coming on the show. I really appreciate her sharing both her expertise and a perspective on where all this is heading. A couple things that really stood out to me from this conversation. One is that bigger vision of making these tools more accessible for all of us, and like what that might look like for the world, both as treatment for individuals, but also like the potential society-wide value of it all, and all of us feeling a little less traumatized and a little more connected to the oneness of the world out there. And I really appreciate her vision about that, and like being able to back it up with actual conversations she's had with people that have taken this medication for PTSD. And then also, as we were talking about at the end there, the need and the value of communicators. I find Lynn Marie to be a very eloquent and persuasive speaker on this topic. And with that mix of knowledge and just showing up as a real person in the way she talks about this. And yeah, you're going to find a pretty consistent theme in this podcast is the value of communicators, because we need people that can sell the idea of the braver new world out there to the rest of us. One of my own sort of personal heroes, I have a very strange personal hero, but it's Carl Sagan. And that was part of the way he thought of himself too. He never thought of himself as an expert in science, but he was really great at communicating what science does and the value of science to society. That was his whole thing around his show Cosmos and the books he wrote. I very much feel attuned with that mission. So that's part of what I'm trying to do here with this podcast. And so if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share it with someone who you think might find it interesting, and check out the full episode wherever you're listening. And if you like more conversations like this, about storytelling, leadership, navigating a changing world, I got two things going on. One is I started an event series called Big Idea Night. And if you're in the San Diego area, I'd love for you to come check that out. You can go to bigideanight.com or just follow my own social media. And we've got our first event coming up. Yeah, April 30th. We've got Ann Middleton, who was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. She's going to be speaking about ecology and wildland restoration, and maybe how we could be rethinking our notion of the human nature divide, which we talked about a tiny bit in the podcast episode. So that's going to be going on in North Park. And I'm going to tell you all here, I'll let you know a secret. The speaker after that is going to be Dr. Jen Gonzalez. She was on another early interview on this podcast, and she's great. She talks about sex and intimacy and how we all show up as ourselves in these emotionally charged situations, and how we can respect ourselves and understand ourselves and believe in ourselves and take care of ourselves in those situations. And so I'm really excited to have her be at the second Big Idea Night. The date is tentatively May 14th. I hope to have that confirmed by end of the week. So if you're hearing this, hopefully by the time you hear this, it's confirmed, and that will be on the website too. So yeah, if you want to hear more stories like this, about storytelling, leadership, navigating a changing world, stay tuned. I hope to also be addressing a newsletter soon too. I am very excited about that step as well. And so thanks so much for being here, and I hope to see you at the next episode of Braver New Worlds.